In the 1950s, there were millions of people driving cars, but only a few thousand were using the vehicle correctly from a technical standpoint. Out of these people, only 700 to 800 are racing, and we can say that only about 100 of them are really good. Above all this is the Grand Prix. There, only 21 drivers compete. Out of these 21, only 6 are truly good. Among these 6 drivers, only 3 manage to be extraordinary. And with a few exceptions, only one becomes a legend. We have completed over 70 seasons in Formula One. This means that approximately 7 different generations have competed. All these different generations had extraordinary names and remarkable talents that stood out. In the 1960s, Jack Brabham, Jim Clark, Graham Hill. In the 70s, Jackie Stewart, Niki Lauda, Emerson Fittipaldi, James Hunt. The 80s featured a legendary rivalry between Prost and Senna. In the 90s, Häkkinen, Schumacher, Damon Hill. In the 2000s, alongside Schumacher carrying the flag, there were Alonso and Hamilton. All these names managed to become giants of their eras. Some drivers achieved this through the flawless structures and stability they pioneered. Others did so with pure driving talent. Let's go back a bit further to the early years of Formula One. We already know that Juan Manuel Fangio was the best of his time. However, there are still those who define him as the greatest driver of all time. While Lewis Hamilton describes Fangio as the father of Formula One, Fernando Alonso interprets him as the man who inspired the future of Formula One. Champions like Alain Prost and Jackie Stewart have stated at every opportunity that Fangio is the best. Ayrton Senna also gave a similar response.
Fangio is the greatest drivers of all times is Fangio.
Growing up surrounded by cars since childhood, Fangio began to learn the mechanical knowledge that would set him apart during his career. Although he was involved in work related to endurance, he secretly entered the racing world away from his family. For this reason, he began to move discreetly when he was a bit far from home. He started competing in local races by modifying a 1929 model Ford in a friend's garage. Just when he was about to showcase himself, World War II broke out. Perhaps the years when he would be at his best were wasted due to the war. Born in 1911, Fangio could not compete in international series until 1948. This situation led to the start of his career in his 30s and made him the oldest driver in most of the Formula One races he participated in. In the 1950s, races lasted more than 3 hours and required incredible physical endurance. Additionally, the drivers had almost no protective equipment. There were even drivers who preferred not to wear helmets. Seatbelts had also become a taboo among drivers. At that time, Formula One cars could easily catch fire. However, pilots often hesitated to use the safety belt at these moments because they thought it wasted time. All of this reveals the dangers of motorsports in the 1950s. It's as if all those drivers are fighting against each other in fast coffins. Fangio was aware of this situation. During his racing era, he lost many friends, even his co-driver who lived with him in accidents. Safety was such a big issue that it had become normal for 3 to 5 drivers to lose their lives in accidents each year. Despite all this, Fangio was the driver who adapted best to these conditions during those years. His ability to share his experience with the team and his good knowledge of the vehicle's limits kept him away from technical issues and potential accidents. Another area where he excelled was teamwork. His old friends see his outstanding success in teamwork and motivating the team as one of the biggest factors in reaching the championship with different teams. He won his first championship in 1951 with Alfa Romeo. He continued to win championships in 1954 and 1955 with Mercedes, in 1956 with Ferrari, and in 1957 with Maserati. Winning championships with 4 different teams in a short period of time elevated him to a different level. The design language and even the engine structures of all the vehicles he raced were very different from each other. We can understand how adaptive a driver he was in mechanical terms from this. We mentioned that he always had a good relationship with his team, but it seems he was the same with his teammates. In the last race of the season in 1955, Fangio's car broke down. He needed to earn points to become champion. Peter Collins, who had no claim to the championship but had a chance to win the race himself, withdraws from the race by giving his car to Fangio on the 35th lap. Do teammates who compete against each other to win do this nowadays? I don't think so. The numerous misfortunes he faced in the 1958 season, which was his last racing season, caused him to drift a bit away from the championship. He couldn't even start the races due to problems with his car. But these were situations far beyond the misfortunes they would experience with the Cuba race. Two armed members of Fidel Castro's 26th of July movement entered the Lincoln Hotel in Havana and kidnapped Fangio. The goal is clear and simple: to undermine the image of the era's president, Batista, by ensuring the race's credibility. But despite all this, it was ordered that the race continue as usual, and a police team set out to pursue the kidnappers. The police forces set up barricades at intersections and deployed armed guards to the airports and all the racing drivers. Fangio, on the other hand, was moved between 3 different houses by the demonstrators. During this process, he was even allowed to listen to the race on the radio. But another chaos occurred during the race. Cuban Cifuentes lost control due to the oily track and could only stop in the section where the spectators were. After this terrible accident, 7 people lost their lives. In the early moments, allegations circulated that Castro intentionally spilled oil on the track to sabotage the race. However, it later emerged that the slippery area was caused by a leak from another driver's car. After all these events, those who kidnapped Fangio had achieved their goal. The whole world was talking about this incident. Fangio, who was later released, said the following: "They treated me well. This was an adventure for me. If the rebels did what they did for a good cause, I accept that as an Argentine." After this tumultuous season, Fangio retired. As a legacy of his time racing with Mercedes, he became the ambassador for Mercedes in Argentina. He made a living by selling these cars. No one broke Fangio's record of 5 Formula One championships for 45 years. This title belonged solely to Fangio until Schumacher won his 5th championship in 2003. Schumacher paid tribute to him by saying, "Fangio was at a much higher level than I have seen. What he did was something else entirely." His status as a respected figure at the pinnacle of the sport over the years makes him a figure we still talk about. There used to be a saying, "to drive like Fangio." 4-time world champion Alain Prost explains that when police stopped a speeding vehicle, they would say, "Do you think you are Fangio?" Prost even recalls using this saying against himself on one occasion. Fangio was such a huge phenomenon for those times. So despite all this, is he the best driver in the world? The University of Sheffield has a study on the best drivers of all time. It is based on data from between 1950 and 2014. A scientific study that addresses different variables such as different moments on various tracks, weather events, vehicle performances, and corner angles. It has been prepared by examining the factors that cause Formula One drivers to win or lose races. In addition to general factors such as the dates of the races, details like which team was worked with and the past successes and failures of that team's members have also contributed to the study. Fangio's most extraordinary feature is that he became world champion with 4 different teams. Since we are in an era where we see the domination of cars rather than drivers in modern sports, it is very difficult for another driver to achieve such a statistic. Looking at the result of this research, it concludes that Fangio is the best driver in the world. But if you ask me, this situation is very different, because as the era changes, the world changes too. Cars, human psychology, opportunities, ecological balance, and thousands of other factors I can't count. Therefore, let's evaluate this situation in a much simpler way, using knowledge from middle school history lessons. Events should be assessed according to the time they occurred. Therefore, every name we mentioned at the very beginning of the video are people who have added value to the formula and left a mark. All those people we mentioned are giants of their own era. We shouldn't make comparisons like this.